Welcome back. It's all this math. This is Professor Parker. If you're here, hit the like button. If you're not subscribed, hit the subscribe button. Also, when we're done, please share this video with at least one other person. And if you have any questions about anything that I attempt to explain during this video, please put your questions in the comment section. Also, if you have comments, put your comments in the comment section. All right. Now, I also want to give a shout out to Marcus Garvey. I got one of my Marcus Garvey t-shirts on. This is one of his quotes: liberate the minds of men, and ultimately you will liberate the bodies of men. All right. He was also referring to women too. By men, he meant people, right? Humans. All right. So what are we doing now? Now we're doing some circle geometry, right? Dealing with arc measure. First of all, what is an arc? What is the arc of a circle? Arc is a part of a circle. So it's the edge of the circle, right? All of this part, not the space inside, but just the edge of the circle, right? That's where the arc can be found. And the circle is broken down into different arcs because of these lines, these chords. These lines that are drawn through the circle are called chords, chords, chords. A chord is a line segment that goes from one part of the circle to another. Now, these chords are both diameters because diameters are like a special chord that cuts through the center of the circle. All right, so keep that in mind. All right, so you got like different arcs that are divided up by the line segment. So you got arc WM, or you could call it arc MW. We got arc MG. MG stands for Marcus Garvey. I was being intentional. MG, Marcus Garvey. Over here, I got WR. WR stands for Walter Rodney. Walter Rodney did a lot of work in Jamaica. Marcus Garvey was born in Jamaica, St. Anne's Bay, Jamaica, in 1887. Walter Rodney did a lot of work as a, revolutionary, as a scholar, as an educator, a college professor in Jamaica, and an organizer in Jamaica, even though he was from Guyana originally, which is just north of South America, right? So Walter Rodney and RG is another arc. So we got 1, 2, 3, 4 arcs. And now some of the arcs could overlap because we could have arc MGR, right, which is a semicircle. That's half of the circle. All right, we could have arc RWM, which is another semicircle, or we could have arc RMG, right, which goes beyond half of the circle, right? All right, now what is our goal? Our goal is to find the measurement of arc RG, right? We want to know the measurement of arc G, the arc measure. Not the arc length, not the arc length. I want to point that out. There's a difference between arc length and arc measure. Arc measure is measured in degrees, right? So we got the degree symbol here, So, and that's equivalent to its central angle. So the measurement of its central angle. Now, since I want to find the arc measure of this arc right here, right, which is going to be equivalent to this angle in here, I need to figure out what I could figure out. Now, I know I could figure out the measure of these two angles or these two arcs, right? And I also know that a whole circle is another piece of information you need to have. An entire circle is 360 degrees all the way around. The total arc measurement of an entire circle is 360 degrees. So that means that the arc measure of this plus this plus this plus this must be 360. Something else we know, because we know about vertical angles, right? The vertical angles theorem says that vertical angles are congruent. And what are vertical angles? Vertical angles are angles that share the same vertex, right? And they're formed by lines that cross each other, forming an X formation, X like Malcolm X, right? So this angle and this angle are vertical angles, right? This angle and this angle, and vertical angles are never adjacent. They can never be adjacent. Like this angle and this angle are adjacent. So these would never be vertical angles. Vertical angles are across from each other and they share a vertex. So this angle and this angle share a vertex and they're across from each other, right? So those are vertical angles. And what we know about vertical angles is that vertical angles are congruent. They're congruent, meaning that the measurements are equal. Also, this angle and this angle are vertical angles, right? So if the angles are vertical and the angles are congruent, that means the arc measurements are congruent. So that means that this arc is congruent to this arc. And this arc is congruent to this arc. So there's just a lot of rules in geometry that you just got to learn. All right. And once you learn the rules, then you can apply the rules and you can create equations. And with the equations, then you got to have your algebra skills up. Your algebra 1 skills got to be on point, right? Because then you can sort, then you can answer questions and figure things out that can lead you to be able to figure out other things. All right. So now, let's say I want to solve for x, right? Because when I solve for x, then I'll know the arc measure of this arc, and I'll know the arc measure of this arc because I can just take whatever x is and just plug it in and do 13 times whatever that number is plus 3, and that'll be the arc measure over here. And then I could do 15 times that number and then subtract 7, and that'll be the arc measure over here. And then because I know the whole joint is 360, once I know this measurement and this measurement, and I know that these two are congruent to each other, right? I could just subtract this and this from 360, and whatever's left over, I could just divide that by 2. Now again, why can I divide it by 2? Because this and this are equal. This and this are equal. So imagine we take this measurement, and let's say hypothetically, right? We ain't do the work yet. Let's say this was 40 degrees and this was 40 degrees. Now, matter of fact, let's make it even easier. Let's say this was 30 degrees and this was 30 degrees. What's 30 plus 30? That's 60. So if the whole circle is 360 and we subtract this 60, because that's 30 and that's 30, what's left? 300. So that means that these two arcs got to add up to 300. And if they're the same measurement, they're congruent, that means they got to be equal. So how do you find them if they're equal? You do the 300 divided by 2, split it down the middle. They each got to be 150. So that's our game plan. That's what we about to do. So first, we about to solve for x. Now, what equation can I use to solve for x? I could do this right here. I could do 13x plus 3 is equal to 15x minus 7. And what gives me the right to do that? Vertical angles are congruent, right? And the arcs, right, that subtend the central angles, right, or that the central angle subtends, they must be congruent also. So these arcs must be congruent. That's why I can set up this equation. I can say this arc is equal to that arc. And now I'm just about to do the algebra and solve for x. So I'm going to transpose, move the 15x over here. It becomes negative when I move it over there. And I'm going to move the positive 3 over there. It becomes negative 3 over there. 13x minus 15x is negative 2x. 13 and negative 15 are my coefficients. Negative 3 minus 7 is negative 10. I divide by negative 2 to get rid of the negative 2. I keep it balanced, so I divide by negative 2 over there also. Negative 2 divided by negative 2 is 1. I know I'm talking fast. If anything you don't catch, just hit the rewind button, just run it back. All right? Negative 2 divided by negative 2 is 1. 1x is the same thing as x, right? We got to know the language of algebra and the language of mathematics. We don't got to write 1x. But we do have to know that 1x and x are congruent. So you got x, and then negative 10 divided by negative 2 is positive 5. All right, so that's what x is. So now that I know that x is 5, right, that's going to help me to get to the measurement of arc RG. So if x is 5, I go in here and I say, okay, well, what's the measure of this arc? What's 15 times 5? We got to know our multiplication facts. That makes this more fun and more easy. 15 times 5 is 75. What's 75 minus 7? 75 minus 7 is 68. So I got 68 degrees. So if that's 68, this got to be 68. Let's make sure. What's 13 times 5? Again, multiplication facts. Know your 5 facts, know your 13 facts. 13 times 5 is 65. What's 65 plus 3? Again, 68. Now, if I know, like I told you, so this arc measure is 68. This arc measure is 68. The whole circle is 360 though. The whole circle is 360. So I'm trying to figure out the missing arcs, these two. So let's do this. Let's add these two arcs together, 68 and 68. What's 68 times 2? We should be able to do that with mental math. 60 times 2 is 120. 8 times 2 is 16. What's 120 plus 16? 136. So these two arcs add up to 136. So to find the measure of these two arcs, the sum of these two arcs, you do the 360 minus the 136. So let's write that down. 360 minus 136. What does that equal? So 360 minus 100 is 260. 260 minus 30 is 230. 230 minus 6 is 224. Right? So that means that these two arcs add up to 224. But you also know, because you know the vertical angles theorem, right? See, I love geometry because geometry challenges you to figure stuff out, to use your brain, think critically, and figure stuff out. And I just like figuring stuff out, right? So if these two arcs add up to 224, but they're equal to each other because they're vertical, these are vertical angles. So if vertical angles are congruent, then the arcs got to be congruent also, right? So all you got to do is take this 224 and divide it by 2 to get the answer, to get RG. So 224 divided by 2 is, basically we just taking half. Dividing by 2 is the same thing as taking half. Half of 200 is 100. Half of 20 is 10. Half of 4 is 2. So the measure of arc RG is 112. 112. 112 plus 112. And we can check our work too. Because if this is 68 and that's 68, that adds up to 136. And what's 224 plus 1? What's 112 plus 112? 112 plus 112 is 224. 224 plus 136 is 360. All right. So that's just something like, that's something, a little problem dealing with arc measurement, right? Arc measurement, vertical angles theorem. You got to use different rules in order to figure stuff out. And geometry is all about figuring things out. Geometry is not just about shapes, triangles, squares, circles, trapezoids, and all that. It's about figuring stuff out. And as responsible human beings, we need to know how to figure stuff out. Unfortunately, it's a lot of people out here that don't know how to figure stuff out. Right? That's why they kind of at a loss and they get taken advantage of. If you don't know how to figure stuff out, if somebody lied to you and you can't even figure out that you're being lied to, you're being played, you're being duped, you're just going to continue being lied to and getting taken advantage of. You got to know how to figure stuff out. And geometry is a good way to practice figuring stuff out. Don't get caught up in the shapes. And I know because a lot of students will sit there in class and be like, I don't want to be an interior decorator. I don't want to be an architect. Well, I got to learn about shapes. Well, you're doing this so you can learn how to figure stuff out, regardless of what career path you want to take. You're going to need to figure stuff out. Even if you're unemployed, you still out here in the world, you need to know how to figure stuff out. Unless you just don't want to figure stuff out and get taken advantage of. So that's on you. But anyway, keep this in mind. Practice some more with these problems. Practice some more with finding arc measurement, using algebra, combining different rules and theories and whatnot, from geometry. All right. And if you ain't hit the like button, hit the like button. If, share this video when we're done, with at least one other person. Subscribe if you haven't subscribed yet. If you got any questions about anything I did, put your questions in the comment section. All right. Put your comments in the comment section. All right. And I will see you on the next video. Peace.